Welcome to this video that I've entitled Instant Gratification, because it's all about this thing that's on the bench here, the S2400 from Myler Instruments. Now, first things first, before we really get into this, is if you have put an SD card into it like I have there, make sure the SD card's not fully put in. The reason for that is quite simply that the way the firmware is currently configured on the S2400, if the machine detects an SD card in place, it will automatically try to load sounds, or it's going to try and load sounds from the SD card, to say automatically, and therefore won't load the default banks. So if you want instant gratification, don't put an SD card in. Here's the channel self-promotion bit. Okay, skip across this bit if you want. But before we start the video, as you know, we normally do parish notices. So here are the parish notices. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, why not hit the subscribe icon? If you want to be notified when videos about this sort of kit hit the channel, there's the bell icon you also want. If you like the contents of this video, please give it a thumbs up. Put comments down below. I do read them. I ingest them, I respond to them, and sometimes I even make videos about them where it's the right thing to do. And finally, for less than the price of a cup of coffee, down there somewhere will be the address of the TMTG community. Go over there, sponsor the channel, help with the production of the videos. You'll also find down there the Instagram and Facebook tags. Go over to those channels because that's where the daily notifications happen. But now, back to the video you've tuned in to see. Okay, let's get going. Honestly, I've had this thing a couple of weeks now and it's been in and out of the box. I am actually buying or I'm having a proper custom box made for this actually, just to keep it safe while it's being sort of moved in and out of places. So when it's in here I like to have it in a box, but that's just me. But this video is really about sort of what were my first impressions about this, because I have had it a couple of weeks. I'm going to be honest with you, I found this thing quite intimidating. Now obviously I'd seen videos about the unit this thing is modelled on, which is the EMU SP1200. And I understood kind of how that worked and what was involved in it. But I don't have anything really like this in my instrument arsenal. I have drum machines, I have samplers, I have full-scale workstations, but I don't really have something like this. This is actually quite an alien workflow for me in the way I've been doing things up until now. So when Myler Instruments announced that they were going to reproduce this unit based on the SP1200, I thought, well, you know what? Why not? And that was 2 years ago. So this unit was conceived by Brad at Myler Instruments 2 years ago. That's when I put my money down, or put my money where my mouth was. And 2 years later, or 18 months later, it turns up. And we've all been watching the progress of this thing on YouTube. As I said, I have had nothing that works quite like this. So this is really a new experience for me in terms of how to sort of make this workflow. And it's interesting that a number of other companies, I mean the MPC's been around for a long while, and Alki have been sort of slowly upgrading the MPC and how it works. Is this an MPC? Probably not, but it's somewhere between the SP1200 and MPC. I suppose that's probably where it fits. Roland have come up with the Groove Machine, or the Groove Box, whatever it's called nowadays. Very, very similar concept to this, but this is the first time I've owned something like this. So let's get going. Okay, first things first, plug it into an amplifier. Cables, check. Plug it into the power. Standard kettle IC plug, or whatever you want to call it. We always used to call them kettle leagues in the UK in the days that have gone by. I think the professional name is an IC plug, but I still call it a kettle plug. And switch it on. And as you see, it starts to boot up. We get the Isla Instruments logo and the chip ID. And if you watch the video I did fairly recently, you know I've just updated this to the latest firmware because Brad said so. So now it's booted up, and because the SD card is not in the back of this machine, it should have loaded up with the default drum kit. And there's something you can play straight out of the box. Okay. So we get the instant sound and noise that we would expect to get from this unit. And this is actually on one of the early pages of the instruction manual. If you've actually got to the point of actually opening the instruction manual. Now, many people, me included, will normally switch this sort of stuff on and start pressing buttons and see what happens before you actually dive into the manual. I have to be honest with this, I actually dove into the manual first, and that sounds really, really sad, but as soon as I knew it was on its way to me, as soon as I got the shipping notification from Isla, I actually went into the manual and started reading it. I have to be honest that not a lot of it was retained up there because I seem to be having issues after the last couple of years I have with sort of retaining information. It's slowly coming back, but it's not there yet. Anyway, this is instant gratification. Brad calls it instant gratification on one of those early pages of the manual. That's why this video is called instant gratification. Now, the first thing to be aware of in instant gratification is when this thing comes on stream, these faders act as volume or levels. So if you put them all up the top, you'll get the maximum volume without having to adjust the mix. Okay, so that's the main mix, and then that's the channel volume within the mix. Okay, so I've just popped that up to a maximum to make sure that it comes across. One of the things I've had problems with in the past, I'm just making sure this is recording here, one of the things I've had problems with in the past is actually getting the drum machines to come across on camera correctly. Now, obviously, this camera is recording me with a microphone pointing straight at me just off shot, whereas I'm actually recording the instrument soundtrack in a different way. And the reason why I'm trying to do that is because I don't want to mess up the voice and the instruments, and hopefully I'll get a cleaner instrument mix, says he. Okay, so the first thing you notice is we go to bank A. Okay, and you move through the banks by pressing this bank button down the bottom here. So if you're watching this, this will be up in the corner somewhere. So we want to be on bank A, and then effectively where there is an instrument loaded into one of the channels on the bank, you'll notice that the pads light up with different colours, and when you press them they flash. Then if we click on there, in bank B there is only an instrument there. There are no instruments on any of the other pads, nor C nor D. So there's 4 banks back to bank A. Okay, I think the colouring is quite good because it's an instant visual recognition that you've got a sound or a sample stored behind that particular pad. And they can be anything you like. So once you actually start cutting your own samples and loops in here, obviously they will be different things. So that's kind of switch it on and get going. Okay, let's get into general operations. Okay, so we all know it's all switched on, noise or sound is there. So then we start looking at the buttons on the side here. Now these are kind of the sort of, in this instant gratification, these are kind of the buttons that you want to be going to. Okay, so the first button is level. Right, level is a way of getting out of the other functions. So by default, you're in level mode. or that's how my one boots up anyway. And if you want to get back to these faders being effectively the volume, you press this level key. We've done that, we've already gone over that. So let's look at the other buttons here. So let's start with envelope. Okay, so envelope is, if you're a synth nut, you'll know that whenever you press a button or a key on a synthesizer, the sound is generated within some sort of envelope. So an attack, a sustain, a decay is a typical sort of envelope that you'll be playing with. So this is, as far as I can see it, a simpler version of that. But if I start with a bass drum, like so, and I start to bring, you can hear it's getting thinner, the sound is getting thinner. And if I do it, bring it back, you can see that. Now, if you're watching this on the Helicam, you can see that channel 1 is doing that. And if I do that with other channels, you can see it does the same thing and you get different results. Alright, so that's what envelope does. It gives you a way to sort of dynamically change the way the sound is being generated. The next one on here is pitch, and this is probably a really good point to sort of talk about the fader positions between the various options down this left hand side. At the moment, if I hit the bass drum or the snare, alright, sounds like that. If I were to touch one of these faders like that, okay, the moment you touch a fader, the instrument will go to where that fader is. So if you left the fader at the top there and go into the next menu, okay, it will remember where the fader was, not where the fader is now is. So like so, but on this, that's still at 0, as in, and the pitch goes plus or minus 20 steps, okay? So even though the fader is up at plus 20, if you look in the window here, you can see the actual pitch thinks it's at neutral, which is 0. And then, as I said, I touched this one. So to get that back to where it needs to be, I need to move the fader to there. Hopefully that makes a lot of sense, but that's effectively what the pitch is doing. So you can go from and it works in real time, so you can have some real fun with this. I'm not going to play around with it anymore. And I also need to set this one here because I touched it back to neutral. Okay, that's what pitch does. Then we get on to loop and slice. Okay, and one of the other things you'll notice when you go into loop and slice, you'll notice that all the faders are up at maximum. Because what this is telling me now is I'm taking the maximum amount of loop that the sample has. So if you took a sample of a second, I'm now seeing a second of sample. As I touch the fader here and bring it down, I'm taking less of that sample. So I'm going from 1 second down to 0 seconds, okay, and steps in between. And that's what loop and slice does. So if I play with the bass drum again, which at the moment, as you can hear, is nothing, because it's assuming that I'm taking nothing. If I take it all the way down, that's the maximum sample. Okay, nothing, back to maximum. And same with this. Now again, the slider position comes into hatch, so as soon as I touch the slider, I need to move the slider. Now, if I were to feed back on this, I would say there needs to be some sort of function that allows you to hold and latch the sliders, because I can see that being quite annoying if you're in a live performance or even a studio and you have everything set up, and then of course you go into a different menu and you move a slider, you know, you move a slider that is set somewhere down the bottom, and at the top, it's then at the top in another menu, and you then move it, and of course that knocks your sound out of kilter, and you have to go and reset it. So that, I think there needs to be, and I don't know whether it exists in the manual yet, but that's the first thing I've seen on this that kind of is a gotcha. So let's point that out. It's a gotcha. Okay, so that's what we've done. Those are 1, 2, 3, 4 buttons. I have to be honest and say, at the moment, I don't understand what multi-mode is all around. It presents with a slightly different screen, but I still don't understand quite what it's giving me. So I'm not going to cover that yet because I really don't understand it. But that's kind of the main controls about instant gratification. So I'll go back to levels now, pump everything back up to the top. Okay, we're ready to go and record some beats. Now, recording beats, you could just be a finger drummer. Or something like that. Get it right eventually. Anyway, you could just be a finger drummer, and there are lots of people that will play this instrument just like that. My problem is I'm not actually a bad drummer. When it comes to actually playing things with my fingers, they go all over the place. And I haven't played drums for, oh my God, 15 years, I suppose, from a drum perspective. I know I've been having conversations with a guy called Sean Curran, who you see commentate on the channel quite a lot, about playing drums in like octapads and that sort of stuff, and playing the R8 manually, but I haven't got round to doing something like that at the moment, and seeing as I'm dead broke, as you know, it ain't gonna happen for a while. Anyway, let's get some beats going. So if we go over here and we tap the tempo button, you'll notice that over here the tempo is now highlighted. It comes on by default 120 beats per minute. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to use this select knob to trim that down to 100 beats per minute, just purely because it's slightly easier to program at 100 rather than 120. And that's one of the ways of doing it. The other way of doing it is to press the tempo button and just enter the number in like so. So let me just enter in 100. There you go. The next thing we need to set out is what pattern are we going to write into this. Now, if you highlight pattern, which is if you press the tempo button, it sort of zips between pattern and tempo, and then you use the select button over this select rotary encoder, you can move up and down through the patterns. Okay, I think at the moment I've probably programmed about 10 patterns into this thing over the course of the last few weeks that I've been playing with it. But we're going to start with pattern 1. Okay, so that's set in there, and now I want to record something, so I press run stop, and as you can hear at the moment there is nothing happening, but those watching the Helicam can see that the transport is moving. So if I want to record something, I press, oops, stop it. I press the record button at the same time as the run stop. Now what you can hear coming through is the metronome. Okay? Okay, so it records in real time, so wherever you put things in real time, it will record it. That's what I was after. I wanted to make sure I knew which one was the hi-hat. So if we go back into that, okay, you get the drift. I'm not going to carry on with that. But therefore, now you've got a pattern running. Now what you can start to do is you then can start to play around with the levels. So if we run that, okay, real time. You can't have the level button on. It doesn't seem to like that in runtime mode. But you can change I stand corrected. No, you can't change it in runtime mode. You have to change it outside runtime mode, and then it will react in runtime mode. Do you know what? I've just learned something. Okay, this is probably the time to talk about the mute button. Okay, works the same if you've been involved in a recording environment and you've ever seen an engineer working at a desk. Quite often you'll hear the mute channels out because you don't want to hear that coming back through. Okay, you can mute out the channel by using the mute. The other side of this is, you can also use the solo. So the solo will actually mute all the other channels out, as opposed to the channel that's you want to hear. So if you want to concentrate on a specific sound, you can do it through the solo. Okay, so that's kind of the easy way of generating beats, if you like. The other thing you should be able to do, I think if I remember correctly, is if you hit this tap button. So if you had had a dance record or something along the lines, and you were trying to sort of work out what the BPMs were, you hit the tap button, and that shouldn't be anything difficult for DJs, because I mean, I don't know what you did when you were DJing, but when I was DJing, I used to have my dance records actually in BPM order, and that way I knew that if I went for a particular record, I knew the records that were sort of within that section of my box would quite easily mix with it. Just a way of cheating. But and the way I used to do that was I used to have a BPM meter, and I just used to tap the BPMs out and then write a little sticker on the corner of the record. It was a cheaty way of doing it, but it worked quite efficiently, and it meant that you could keep the tempo going in the room without actually putting something on that sort of moved out of the tempo region you were in. Anyway, that kind of is the instant gratification, getting some beats going, getting the transport going. Okay, you know, you're there, you've got sounds, you're away. Okay, this is probably the last piece of this sort of instant gratification video I'm doing, and that's all around the step programmer. So this does actually come with a step programmer, and you enter the step programmer by pressing that step button that's at the top of the unit there. It's got two functions. One's the save function, which is invoked if you hit the shift button, but the other one is the step program. And what you notice is in the, I'm actually going to turn the volumes down for this, so you can just hear them. But in the window there, you'll see a bunch of dots. If I then turn that down. And effectively, A1 is that track, A3, A6, which is what's there. Okay, and you can see it running through. Now if I were to stop the run stop there, and then I use, come off of that, and then make sure the tempo is not highlighted, and then this select rotary encoder effectively moves the position in the bar. Okay, so effectively that's 0, that's beat 1, beat 2, beat 3, and beat 4. Okay, so you can see that hopefully this is coming across on the Helicam. You can see this in the window. And if I wanted to put additional beats in, so I want to put a beat between 1 and 2, and I want it to be the alternative bass drum, I press the relevant pad, and that will now appear in that slot. And you also notice that A2 has appeared. The other thing you see here is if I take it out of record and I then hit it into run, every time it fires, you see the window will highlight. Okay, so that becomes an easy way of effectively building your track up. So if you're not happy to tap the track in and quantize it, and you want to actually build the track up using the step sequencer, that's how you do it. Okay, so that will get you going. What you do from here, that's a very good question, and it's also a question that I've got notes on about the next set of videos that I'm going to do with this thing, but I'm not quite sure how to sort of shuffle them in, if that makes any sense. Anyway, for now I'm going to leave this video on that note because it's probably long enough for you to digest. So live long and prosper, and see you guys next time.